ABC General Hospital spoilers reveal that in Port Charles, power never shifts quietly, and the most dangerous transformations are the ones that begin beneath the surface, where ambition disguises itself as necessity and violence becomes a tool of order rather than chaos. What is unfolding around Cullum is not simply a desperate attempt to survive scrutiny, but a calculated evolution of control, one that reveals a man no longer content with influence in the shadows. He is reaching for something far more absolute. The kind of power that reshapes institutions, rewrites loyalties, and erases obstacles without hesitation. And in Cullum's mind, Dante has become the most immediate obstacle that must be removed. The tension between them did not erupt overnight. It grew slowly, fed by suspicion, sharpened by instinct, and solidified by the quiet certainty that neither man could coexist with the other for long. Dante is not reckless, but he is relentless, driven by a moral clarity that makes him dangerous in a world built on compromise. Cullum recognizes that kind of man immediately, not because he respects him, but because he knows exactly how much damage that kind of conviction can do. Dante does not need proof to keep digging. He needs only the feeling that something is wrong, and once that feeling takes hold, he will not stop. That persistence, that refusal to back down, has turned him into a threat far greater than Cullum initially anticipated. At the same time, Cullum is no longer reacting, he is planning. The idea of eliminating Dante is not born out of panic, but out of strategic necessity. In Cullum's vision, the system itself must be reshaped to accommodate his operations, and that begins with control of the Port Charles Police Department. Authority must be centralized, predictable, and loyal. It cannot be left in the hands of someone like Dante, who refuses to be controlled, who resists pressure, who stands too close to the truth. To secure that control, Cullum needs a replacement. Someone who can wear the badge, command the department, and yet remain tethered to his influence. And in that equation, Cassius emerges as the perfect candidate. Cassius is not simply a pawn, but he is not entirely free either. His identity as Nathan gives him access, legitimacy, and a carefully constructed narrative that others are willing to believe. But beneath that identity lies a man caught between survival and conscience, between the role he must play and the consequences he cannot fully control. Cullum sees only utility. He sees a man who can be elevated, shaped, and used to stabilize the power structure he is building. By placing Cassius at the top of the police hierarchy, Cullum would gain something far more valuable than protection. He would gain the ability to dictate the flow of justice itself, to decide which cases move forward and which disappear, which truths are exposed and which are buried forever. But no plan exists in isolation, and Cullum's ambitions ripple outward, touching lives that extend far beyond his immediate reach. Sonny's family stands at the center of that expanding danger. For Cullum, the conflict is no longer personal, but symbolic. Sonny represents a different kind of power, one rooted in loyalty, legacy, and a network of relationships that cannot easily be dismantled. To weaken Sonny, Cullum must strike where it hurts the most, not through direct confrontation, but through calculated loss. Dante becomes the perfect target not only because he is a threat to Cullum's operations, but because his death would fracture Sonny in a way no external attack ever could. There is a cruel logic to it, one that Cullum is willing to embrace without hesitation. If Marco's death can be weaponized as justification, if the narrative can be twisted into a cycle of retaliation, then Dante's fate can be framed as inevitable rather than orchestrated. Cullum understands the power of perception. He knows that truth is less important than the version of events people are willing to accept. And if he can convince the right people that Dante's downfall is simply the consequence of past actions, then he can eliminate his greatest obstacle without exposing his own hand. Yet within this carefully constructed plan lies a fracture that Cullum cannot fully control. Cassius, despite his position, is not immune to the emotional consequences of what is being set in motion. He understands what Dante represents, not just as a figure of authority, but as a father, a partner, a cornerstone of stability for those who depend on him. The idea of stepping into power at the cost of Dante's life is not a clean transaction. It is a burden, one that threatens to unravel the very identity Cassius has been forced to adopt, because if Dante falls, the fallout will not remain contained. Lulu will be shattered, and Rocco, already standing on the edge of emotional instability, could collapse under the weight of guilt and fear. This is where the plan begins to shift from calculated to volatile. Cullum may believe he is orchestrating a controlled transition of power, but the human cost introduces variables that cannot be predicted. Rocco's fragile state becomes a silent threat, a reminder that secrets do not remain buried when grief begins to speak. If pushed too far, if forced to confront the reality of Dante's fate, he may reveal truths that were never meant to surface. And that possibility places Cassius in an impossible position, where protecting himself may require protecting Dante, even as Cullum moves forward with plans to destroy him. What makes this situation even more dangerous is the illusion of inevitability that surrounds it. Each character is being drawn toward a moment that feels predetermined, as if the outcome has already been decided and all that remains is the unfolding. But beneath that illusion lies a series of choices, each one capable of altering the trajectory in ways no one fully anticipates. Dante continues his investigation, unaware of how close he stands to becoming the next target. Cullum advances his strategy, confident in his ability to control every outcome. Cassius navigates a path that grows narrower with each passing moment, caught between obedience and resistance. And in the center of it all is the growing realization that this is not just a battle for power, but a confrontation between two fundamentally different ways of existing in the world. Dante represents a belief that truth, once uncovered, has the power to correct what is broken. Cullum represents the opposite, a belief that truth is irrelevant unless it can be controlled, shaped, or erased. When those two forces collide, there is no compromise, there is only survival. As the pressure builds, as alliances begin to shift, and hidden agendas move closer to the surface, the threat against Dante becomes more than just a possibility. It becomes a looming certainty, one that casts a shadow over every decision, every conversation, every moment of trust. And if Cullum succeeds, the consequences will not end with Dante's fall. They will echo through Port Charles, reshaping the balance of power, redefining loyalty, and leaving behind a silence that feels less like peace and more like the aftermath of something that can never truly be undone. The balance of power in Port Charles begins to fracture at the exact moment Sonny is placed in handcuffs, not as a kingpin finally cornered, but as a man deliberately positioned to take the fall for a crime he did not commit. The accusation that he murdered Marco does more than threaten his freedom. It destabilizes an entire network of loyalties that has long held the city together in uneasy equilibrium. Sonny has faced suspicion before, but this time feels different, heavier, more calculated. The evidence aligns too neatly, the timing is too precise, and the silence from certain corners of the system is far more telling than any accusation spoken aloud. This is not an investigation unfolding naturally. It is a narrative being written around him, one designed to isolate him, weaken him, and ultimately remove him from the board. Behind that narrative stands Cullum, no longer operating as a shadowy manipulator, but as an architect of a new order. His ambitions have expanded beyond survival or concealment. He is building something structured, controlled, and deeply embedded within the institutions meant to uphold justice. And at the center of that construction stands Cassius, a man whose ascent within the PCPD is as strategic as it is unsettling. What appears to be a sudden consolidation of authority is, in reality, the result of careful positioning. Cassius is being elevated not because he has earned trust, but because he can be shaped into a vessel for Cullum's influence. Through him, Cullum does not need to fight the system. He becomes the system. This shift creates a quiet but devastating transformation within the police department itself. Lines of loyalty blur, not through open betrayal, but through subtle realignments of power. Officers begin to question not only who they are serving, but whether the institution they have sworn to protect still represents the truth they once believed in. Orders become less about justice and more about control. Investigations stall, evidence disappears, and decisions begin to favor outcomes that serve a hidden agenda. What emerges is not chaos, but something far more dangerous, a controlled distortion of reality, where the appearance of law and order masks a deeply corrupted core. Dante feels this shift before he can fully understand it. His instincts, sharpened by years of navigating moral gray areas, begin to warn him that something is fundamentally wrong. Sonny's arrest is the catalyst, but not the cause. It is the visible crack in a structure that has been weakening from within for far longer. Dante refuses to accept the narrative being handed to him, not because of blind loyalty, but because the pieces do not fit. The man he knows, the father he trusts, does not align with the crime he is being accused of. And more importantly, the system that claims to seek truth is moving too quickly toward a conclusion, as if the outcome has already been decided. This realization pushes Dante into a position he has long tried to avoid. He is no longer simply an investigator working within the system. He is a man forced to confront the possibility that the system itself has been compromised. Every step he takes forward becomes an act of defiance. Every question he asks a challenge to authority. And as he pushes deeper, the resistance he encounters becomes more direct, more aggressive, less concerned with maintaining appearances. Subtle warnings evolve into clear obstacles. Access is denied. Allies grow distant. The ground beneath him begins to shift in ways that cannot be explained away as coincidence. At the same time, Cassius finds himself at the center of a transformation he cannot fully control. The power being handed to him is intoxicating in its scope, but suffocating in its implications. Every decision he makes carries weight far beyond its surface, and every move is observed, measured, and quietly influenced by Cullum's unseen hand. He is no longer just playing a role. He is becoming part of a structure designed to operate without accountability, and yet, the closer he moves to the top, the clearer the consequences become. Sonny's arrest is not justice, it is leverage. Dante's growing resistance is not a threat to order. It is a threat to control. This dual awareness places Cassius in an impossible position. To fully embrace the power he has been given is to become complicit in a system built on manipulation and deceit. To resist it is to risk exposure, to unravel the identity he has fought to maintain, and to place himself directly in Cullum's line of fire. There is no safe path forward, only choices that carry different forms of destruction. And as the pressure builds, the cracks within him begin to mirror the cracks spreading through the PCPD itself. What unfolds next is not a simple conflict between individuals, but a war within the institution. It is a battle fought not with open violence, but with information, influence, and the careful manipulation of truth. Files are altered, witnesses are redirected. Internal investigations are launched, not to uncover wrongdoing, but to suppress it. The department becomes a battlefield where every action has two meanings, the one that is visible and the one that is hidden beneath it. Officers are forced to choose sides without ever being told that a choice exists. Dante stands at the center of that invisible war, carrying a burden that grows heavier with each discovery. He begins to see patterns where others see coincidence, connections where others see isolated incidents. The deeper he goes, the clearer it becomes that Sonny's arrest is only the beginning. The case against him is designed not to prove guilt, but to prevent the truth from surfacing. And if that truth emerges, it will not only exonerate Sonny, but expose a network of crimes that reaches far beyond a single murder. Cullum understands this risk, and his response is not hesitation, but escalation. The more Dante pushes, the more dangerous he becomes. And in Cullum's world, danger is not managed, it is eliminated. The idea of removing Dante shifts from possibility to necessity, from contingency to priority. Because as long as Dante remains within the system, there exists a chance, however small, that the carefully constructed illusion will collapse. What makes this situation truly volatile is the convergence of forces that were never meant to collide. Sonny, stripped of power but not of influence, begins to recognize the pattern forming around him. Dante, driven by truth but isolated from support, moves closer to uncovering something far larger than he expected to. Cassius, elevated but internally divided, stands at a crossroads that will define not only his future, but the fate of everyone connected to him. And Cullum, operating with increasing confidence, pushes forward with a plan that grows more dangerous with every step. In this environment, secrets do not remain contained. They build pressure, layer upon layer, until they reach a point where silence is no longer sustainable. And when that moment arrives, the explosion will not be controlled. It will expose everything: the false accusations, the hidden alliances, the crimes buried beneath official reports. It will force every character to confront the truth they have tried to avoid, and to choose whether they will protect themselves or fight for something greater. For now, the city holds its breath, caught in the space between what is known and what is about to be revealed. But beneath that fragile stillness, the battle has already begun, and as the lines between justice and corruption continue to blur, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. This is no longer just a case. It is a reckoning, and when it arrives, it will not ask for permission.